Hello and welcome back, and today we are looking at Plex performance tests on the brand new QNAP TVS h1288X, but with an ever so slight difference today because, to be perfectly frank, we knew this was going to do well. This system, it's got a Xeon W1250 6-core processor with embedded graphics. It is an absolute behemoth, and although I will of course be going through the test that I always do, I just wanted to get something right out the way early doors for you guys wondering straight away that have been following my Plex videos. That is the biggest file I ever test. That is the 400 megabits per second 4K UHD HEVC or H.265 10-bit file. It is the file, let's click play, that is in our Plex test performance. We can see it is 1.4 gigabytes in size for a 30-second file. Now, yes, this is an enormous file, but as you can already see, it's converting it. It's already doing it. This can play that big file, and as you can see, it is being outpaced by the caching there. I've already done the maths for you guys there in the background, but if you didn't already know, if we were to do 1.4 gigabytes and it was a 90-minute movie, so that would be for 30 seconds, 180. So if we times that by 180, that means a standard 90-minute film would be around 252 gigabytes in size. That is what a 90-minute movie at that weight of a file would be. So again, a 250 gig 90-minute movie right now, that is going to play that file. The reason I'm getting this out of the way early doors is you guys know damn well that this system was always going to be able to play that file. The CPU utilization is right there, and if we duplicate this file, we'll see if we can play two variants of that file simultaneously. As we can see on this screen, it's just about to start playing. It's clearing the cache, so let's go ahead and play it in the two tabs and leave that open on the top there. And again, as you can see, it's recaching the file at the bottom there. It's still playing in this other window. Every time we come back to it, every time we look away, it will pause. And at the same time, we can see how much my system is doing the work. There it is. But straight away, off the bat, before we go any further, we can see that it is able to play back and cache that file on both of these occasions. Yes, utilization is high, but it is playing that file, but of course pausing it in the other window as we play it. So let's have them running side by side now, and as you can see, if we have both of those windows running, we're getting the tiniest bit of performance dip, and the fans on my laptop are starting to kick in, but it is certainly being done by this NAS. So of course we're going to go through a lot of the mainstream file types, but I really wanted you guys to see the top end early doors on this system, because it is absolutely killing it. So for now, let's talk about the NAS that's in today's testing, of course. Today's test is with the TVS h1288X, and frankly right now, even in preliminary testing, this is the score to beat for a desktop Plex media server. It is not cheap, arriving at just shy of $2,000 in its default model, and that's without Thunderbolt, and this is the 8 hard drive, 4 SATA SSD and 2 NVMe bay model, and this is the 16 gig model by default, utilizing ZFS, which certainly helps the file system there in the background. And again, we are using a combination of hard drives and SSDs inside here, where you're using the main hard drive array and that hard drive array with SSD caching there in the background. But with this system and the multi-tiered approach to it, I think it's marginally acceptable at this point. And also, because if you look at the storage utilization, the benefits that the storage brings to the transcoding is largely irrelevant in these tests. It all comes down to that CPU, as you can see there. And as always, we are using a Plex pass. This is utilizing Plex here on this system. We're using OBS, so there may be the odd bit of slowdown here in the background, but I will say that any slowdown is definitely because of my system and not to do with the NAS itself. We knew this system was going to pass most of our tests. This is when we leave home and prosumer and start entering business areas, and generally as a rule of thumb, I wouldn't touch a NAS like this for Plex testing, but given its predecessor, the TVS-h1288, was utilised in Plex by a number of you thanks to its quad-core i7 and the 872XT, which arrived at £1,600 to £1,800. Both of those were popular Plex Media Server NAS devices. I think it is acceptable that this covers in our bracket of Plex Media Server testing. And of course, if we go into the server settings, we can have a look and we can see that we are using the transcoder, we are using a Plex Pass sign up for this, and we're using exactly the same test files as we do before, as comical as it may seem in this current range of testing. Down here you can see those Plex test files for later on, but for now, of course, we want to conform to the testing that we've done in previous videos. So again, first thing we're going to look at, of course, is the movie The Matrix, and this is a 720p H.264 file, very small overall. And if we play the file, it's going to play back like an absolute dream. We know we can skip back and forward as much as we want. And again, I'm not able to test sound, unfortunately, for you guys because of the YouTube bots and how it will restrict and get this video removed. Either that or monetization will be deactivated along with the audio in the video. So it kind of kills any point of doing video quality stuff. And audio. But as you can see, you can flick all over the place, and this is over the network on a wireless device, about 8 meters away from the wireless access point. So let's start some of our transcoding there. Now we'll flick down, of course. Now we're going to flick down to a 480p transcode, and again we're now looking at the file in 480p. And of course, the reason we test these minimal resolution transcodes is because a lot of you will have a Plex Media server accessed by multiple users at any given time. However, those multiple users, when accessing the device, will be perhaps using metered data connections. They'll be using limited data connections via their internet service provider, or they'll be using devices where the full-sized file is just not suitable to be played. 480p there is running like an absolute dream. CPU is doing nothing there. Let's go down to 240p. Generally, 240p is when there's slight hiccups in the way the system works, but a lot of that is to do with the playback more so than the system. So there's a slight pinch of delay there, but again, this is more due to the categorization of 240p. And if we go down to 160p, which is going to be an absolute blurry mess, you will be watching this on some of the smallest screens out there. As we're seeing, the CPU couldn't care less there. So let's carry on back. Now we're going to switch to our 1080p movie file. And again, we go straight into Little Shop of Horrors. And again, we'll start from the beginning there, because of course it is finding it from our preliminary setup. And again, skip back and forward as much as we want. Sorry, accidentally paused it. Absolutely fine. Things moving exactly how we want them to appear. Now we'll do the standard transcode. We're going to flick down now to not the automatic conversion. We don't really want that. We're going to flick down into a 720p 4 meg, and again, absolutely fine. Going all the way through. CPU couldn't give a crap. Let's go back down there. Go even smaller. Let's go to the bumpy 480 and the odd 240 even. Plays back. Flick between, absolutely fine. Slight delays there, and again, kind of expected when you go for a conversion, because it's not buffering the whole thing, but as you can see, it's buffering alarmingly fast already there at the bottom. And of course, we can go down to the very smallest 160p, the blur monster, and we can see transcoding is happening incredibly fast. You have to remember this is a whole movie just over 1 hour 40 minutes. So that difference there is still pretty large in a matter of seconds, and the CPU again couldn't care less. So again, we've tested 1080p at 720p. Now let's move into the more industrial Jellyfish testing. Again, do check them out. The link will be on the screen throughout the videos if you want to try them out. And again, we can go small. Bear in mind, I mentioned this in my previous videos, H.264 should pretty much always play pretty straightforward. It's H.265 where the problems live, because H.265, otherwise known as HEVC, requires licensing, and a lot of the time hardware vendors don't really go ahead and pay extra for that licensing. You can go ahead on most QNAP systems and get that sorted privately. You can go down to their multimedia, the Cayenne player, and if you have a look, the Cayenne player, it looks like it's not available. Oh, there it is. And with that, you can get the licensing to have H.265 playback natively, but again, that applies to pretty much all vendors, and that is why, regardless of the NAS or indeed most hardware vendors of servers that you use for a Plex Media server, the minute you try to play an H.265, it will automatically transcode. Case in point, we'll look at the H.264, and it plays back absolutely straight away. And again, no bothering by the CPU, couldn't care less, playing back in original quality at 1080p HD, and that's a 3 megabits per second file. Translate down to 160p, absolutely fine, caching, firing out there into the distance. Exactly what I would have expected from this. Now if we go to exactly the same file type, this time in H.265 or HEVC, what you'll see is the system will need to automatically convert due to the H.265 licensing conflict. But again, absolutely fine, converting all the way along the line. We can go to the bottom, go to the smallest transcode there, and boom. Fine transcode. You know, maybe we don't want to go that extreme. Maybe we want to go to maybe a 720. Go to 720p HD. Absolutely fine. Caching, wiping the board. Perfectly fine there. And again, same goes for 10-bit media. 10-bit, otherwise known as HDR. H.265. Again, you can't get 10-bit H.264, at least from these test files anyway. Go ahead, playback, automatic transcode, down there, playing like an absolute charm there. All the way along the board, great results. And again, we'll flick down to 480p this time. Sorry, accidentally paused. And once again, nothing but success, nothing but net, absolutely fine. And again, CPU pretty much sleeping on the job there, doesn't need to worry. So let's go into the larger densities, and again, I'm going to ignore the bulk of the 264s, but just to knock them out early, we'll go for 100 megabits per second H.264, and again, that file we can actually spot here at 350 megabytes, that's a quarter of a gig for 30 seconds, which is pretty dense, it's 100 meg per 10 seconds, and as we can see, we can flick along, let the cache catch up, and it's going to play the file. No, it didn't want to, I think I skipped forward there, I shouldn't have done that. Let's give that a fair test this time. Go ahead, let it cache, caching straight away along the board. Have a look, playing the original file type, no conversion happening, but cache a little bit slower this time because we are dealing with a particularly dense file. And this is where you're going to see that CPU have to do its work that tad bit more. The reason being that when you are dealing with these larger file sizes, it's quite literally the size of the file that becomes the problem. Now if we move into 4K on H.264, because I said I'd knock that out, let's go for the biggest. This is a 200 megabyte 4K UHD H.264 file. So again, that file is this one. That's the H.264, and that is 716 megabytes. So again, coming up on almost 3/4 of a gigabyte for 30 seconds of footage. So let's go ahead and play that file, open that up, playing back on original quality, and we'll see how the system reacts. You can see the caching is happening nice and quick there in the background. It's seemingly seizing at 0.06, which is interesting, something I didn't expect, and something that perhaps we should look into afterwards, because right now what's interesting is the CPU has not spiked. So again, very surprising seeing that happening there for such a large file type. Perhaps if we move into a conversion and let it automatically convert the file, which again isn't strictly what we wanted this file to do, we'll see what it does here. We'll give it a while. We're still testing that same big old H.264 file, but there may be slight confliction here playing this file, and definitely something we should note. The CPU has adjusted and tried, as we see there, utilization has spiked, but it looks like this particular file type doesn't want to know, and in many regards it's quite odd. It has spiked there in the megabits per second in the conversion. But now let's switch over from the H.264 back to the H.265 and 10-bit media. So we're going to go through each tier, and we're just going to go straight into 10-bit. We're not going to bother with the non-10-bit variants unless we don't have a viable alternative. This is a 10 megabits per second, 1080p HEVC 10-bit file, and again, absolutely fine. Conversion down the line, running a conversion there, and we'll knock it down to 720 this time. We'll let that conversion take place. We're starting to see the CPU have a few odd little bumps, as you can see, all the way through our testing regimen here. And it's also worth highlighting, while these files play, and this is especially relevant, let's stop that there, to when I started with that enormous file. The odds of you playing a file of this density is incredibly rare. You would have to be running quite a fantastically expensive home cinema system. And not only, I mean, as mentioned, if you were to have a 90-minute movie at this picture quality, you are dealing with a shy of a quarter of a terabyte in size video file. This is so raw it hurts as an MKV. And remember, this is Plex Playback, not video editing, something this NAS can do. So when I do critique this at the end of the video, the pros and the cons, you gotta stay relative throughout the course of this video. So let's go with the 30 megabits per second. And again, unfortunately, we don't have a 30 megabit HDR or 10-bit, but we can go HEVC. So we'll let that play. And again, caching there a little slower for this denser file. And we can go there. This is the 30 megabit HEVC. So if we find it there, this is the 100 megabit file. But again, caching seems to outpace playback quite easily there. And we can convert and pop down. Let's go down to something crazy like 240p. As we can see, despite the fact we're playing back this dense file to something a bit more micro-manageable for a mobile device, that would mean if you had a high dense movie of this quality in your home cinema system and you wanted to watch it on your mobile while in a coffee shop, this is the kind of test you would want to wonder whether it can play, and it seems to have passed with flying colours. Next, let's go into a much bigger file type here and make our way into the 4K categories. We're not going to ignore the 100, actually let's not ignore it, let's just give it a quick play just to see that it will play the 100 megabit there. It's caching absolutely fine, and again, we'll get it knocked down to something, you know, coffee shop mobile phone sort of quality there. So let's go down to perhaps, this time we're going to go for a 480p file so you can still maintain the picture quality to a degree. And this would be if you were accessing it via, I would say, Wi-Fi in your average Starbucks or Costa or Nero or whatever. That's kind of the speed you would want to throttle down to for a file this size to be played on a mobile device. Absolutely fine, great playback. So now we're going to go into the 4K, and this is a 4K 10-bit HEVC or H.265 4K 120-bit file. This is a monster of a file. And again, this is down here. This is when we've moved into that category. This is half a gig in size, this file. Caching, absolutely fine there at the bottom. Obviously, it's loading into a conversion because of the HEVC, but it's playing this file. And again, let's go for coffee shop style. We're going to go for, actually, we're going to go for commute. So if you're on a train journey with tunnels, you're going to go things real small, and as blurry as hell as this is going to be on screen, let's see if this system can knock this enormous file into a 160p. And this is where that CPU earns its money. Look at it. It is playing back these files like an absolute charm. And those files are being played back. And as you see, the conversion has been a success. So there we go, let that file finish. And now we're playing with the big guns. Now we're going to look at 200 and 400 megabits per second 10-bit media. In other words, the 700 megabytes file. So again, 716, close to 3/4 of a gigabyte in size. And again, very similar to that of the H.264 that struggled earlier. And after that, we're going to look at that 1.4 gigabyte. That's 1,400 or so megabytes per second, or megabyte file. And again, the conversion from megabytes to gigabytes isn't strictly the 1,000. But let's have a look at that MKV file there. Let's play that file back. And this is almost bringing us full circle to the beginning of the video right now. But as we can see straight away, it's already started the caching there. We can open it up there. We've got the conversion taking place. It's absolutely fine, and caching and creation is happening much faster than playback. CPU and memory utilization has noticeably gone up, it has to be said, but things are still working exceptionally well. And if we convert that down, and we'll go down to a 240p there, let's call 240p a bus journey, something where wireless connectivity is jumpy, let's put it like that. We can see that the CPU is doing its job there in the background, but 240p has always been a troublesome resolution, but it is seemingly playing it back nevertheless. So again, fantastic results there. Finally, let's get back to it. Right, let's go right by Alpha and Omega. Beginning is the end. Let's go straight back into that massive file there. This is going to be a straightforward one test because we've already done the multiple earlier on. Let's go into it. And the caching's taking place. Yes, it's working a bit harder. This is 1.4 gigabytes for 30 seconds. But as you can see, playback has happened. Let's go for a conversion now. Let's convert this down. So let's go down to 1080p 10 megabit. We're going to go through each of the tiers. Needless to say, I'm probably going to jinx myself here. This has been the most successful Plex media server test we've done this entire year. Right now, we're just waiting for this to convert, and I think this is where we hit potential limitations on this device. It has to be said. There you go. I jinxed myself, didn't I? But nope, it has done the job. So again, we've got that conversion for 1080p and the full cache, and let's go down to 720p. What did that last one take? Probably about 7 seconds. I think we may have hit a wall. The CPU has stopped. No, the CPU just needed a run up. It's doing it. It's going to go for the conversion. We're going to see some caching shortly. What are we up to so far? 9-10 seconds. Let's have a look. Are we going to get that conversion? Are we out of luck? Let's have a look. No, we're doing it. We've got the caching. The transcoding engine switching gears. Absolutely fine. And lastly, let's put it down to potato quality. Let's push it down to potato quality. This is when the CPU is probably, if it had a personality, would be furious with me with what I'm doing right now. But as I say, so far, this has by far been the most successful Plex test of this year. And likely, as 2020 draws to a close, I would say this is currently the Plex media server NAS to beat right now, even outpacing the likes of the 872 XT, and it's done. Right now, I have already done my Plex Media Server Best of the Years. Unfortunately, this NAS will not be in that list because it was released after October 31st. And as a general rule of thumb, I will not consider the best NAS of a given year unless it's been released before that date. But if you are watching this, and maybe I'll add a tiny little extra into that article and the video when it goes live, this right now is the Plex Media Server to beat. Now, after this video, I've got a few other NASs I'm going to Plex test before the end of 2020. But going into 2021, I should highlight I'm going to be featuring a new range of Plex Media Server test videos for next year. These are going to be featuring a lot more client devices. I'm going to be utilizing a lot of mobile devices and HDMI, like Amazon Fire Stick, stuff like that, to benchmark the test quality. It was just for the rest of this year I couldn't change the architecture of these tests without invalidating or countering against the test that I've done throughout the rest of the year on the Synology Disk Station and the QNAP Turbo Station desktop NASs. So going into 2021, I'm hoping to retest the entire range of NASs for Plex Media Server that you've seen so far this year. But the new tests will be revisiting some of these media files and new, bigger and more varied test files in a new client relationship with the NASs rather than the direct interface that we've been using so far. It's just a question of now we can put a closing full stop and the end on this range of tests. But for 2020, right now, the QNAP TVS h1288X is the desktop Plex Media Server NAS to beat. It's a bit of a price tag, it has to be said, but I do think it delivers. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the other Plex Media Server videos this year. As I say, we've got a couple more coming, but those have already been pre-recorded. This is the last one I'm recording in 2020. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed these videos, and do stay tuned in 2021 for an extended range of Plex Media Server tests across a range of devices coming soon. Click like if you've enjoyed this video. Click subscribe if you enjoyed those others and want to learn more. And visit the links in the description for my written, updated tests on Plex Media Server and the different NASs, which I will be updating next year as we do more tests. So do subscribe for those updates. I will see you next time.